Welcome back to Junk and Trunk Talk, and today we've got the awesome Josh Sabarra joining us for Junk and Trunk Talk. So welcome, Josh. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today.
Of course, Pete. I'm excited.
So Josh, I want to go back a little bit and talk about Josh before all this craziness and fame in what you do now. Can we just reverse back and talk about you before all that, and what was that like to grow up as Josh?
Well, I mean, I think fame, by the way, is a little bit of a leap.
Okay. All right.
But I always say, like, having worked with so many celebrities throughout my career and seeing what that entails, I always think, like, an author is the right level of celebrity. Because when you go to the mall, nobody knows it's you. I mean, aside from the few people, like a Stephen King is very recognizable, but people can get and appreciate your work, but it's not that same kind of fandom. So I like to at least make clear that I don't see myself as
play it down a little bit.
Yeah, but I don't know. Growing up was interesting. I mean, I grew up in a liberal Jewish household on the East Coast of the United States. And my parents, my father, interestingly, is a urologist. So any discussion of sexuality, body parts, things like that were essentially dinner table conversation in our house. So things that other people don't talk to their parents about are extremely easy for me to talk to them about. That said, while they were always accepting, and we had friends in the family who were gay and, family members who are gay, but I guess in my mind, I was nervous about how close to home was too close to home. And I always had such a close relationship with them, and they were such a good support system that I didn't want my relationship with them to change. So that's sort of why for so long I just ignored that part of my life. And as I grew up and went to college, and I still sort of kept that quiet and never acted on it either until then I finally get to Hollywood, having this career in marketing and PR, and obviously opportunity is at your doorstep. There's not a lack of gay men, particularly in the entertainment field, not to stereotype, but it's a pretty diverse field. And I started to realize that there was this piece of my life that I was missing, and I just felt like at some point I wasn't really living the life that I wanted to have, and I was using other things to make myself feel better. So, I think marginalized people who grow up different or discernibly different are, I was bullied and all of those, told you're not good enough, and you grow up with those feelings. And so I felt like I could use other things, make myself appealing to other people, whether that was a high-level job at a studio long before I should have been at that level. Well, not before I should have been at that level, but sooner than most people were at that. And, plastic surgery and celebrity friends, all of those things that were just sort of like tap dancing to keep going without acknowledging the true person underneath.
Mm-hmm. Josh,
so
if you were to look back and be able to have a chat to yourself back then, what would you tell Josh at that time in your life?
I think it's a very, it's something that we all look back on and think to ourselves, like, it's so liberating to be out and things will be okay. But I think when we're younger, it's harder for us to process the ramifications of some of those choices.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at things, with a less mature eye than we are when we're older. So looking back, of course, I would say, start living your life, like be yourself sooner rather than later. To some degree, it probably saved me a lot of trouble and heartache, because who knows what kind of no good I would have been up to. But I was so laser focused on the illusion that I didn't have time for anything else. Or at least that was part of the excuse I would use.
Yeah. So Josh, for people that are sort of embarking on that coming out process and getting to the point where they're actually honest with their friends and their family and their work colleagues, what would you say to that person?
I think it's important for particularly younger people, but obviously any age group, to know that there's acceptance and family, even if not biological family, waiting for you and there to support you. And there are so many people and organizations and groups who are there to do that. And there's always a way to find support. It's really just reaching out. And that's, I think, what I want. I would want younger people to know that there is a community there. There are people to rally behind you, even if the people who you're really,
And Josh, for myself, as coming out very much later in my life, and it was really scary. And I think never, as a community, to forget how scary it is actually when you're standing at that cliff face and actually being open and honest to your friends and family. So what I would also like to share with whoever's watching this is also never diminish how scary it is, and never forget that. So when you're supporting others, to actually remember what it felt like for yourself. And I think that's something that, I tend to see it quite a bit in the community, is that it's downplayed. It's not that big a deal. Whereas I very much think that we all as a community need to remember how scary that moment was and support.
Well, I think we've seen that evolve over time. I think because attitudes have changed to some degree, and by the way, there are many places in which they haven't changed. And, it's very, there's sort of a screen in front of you when you grow up on the coasts, or for LA, you don't see the problems as much. And sometimes it takes visiting somewhere else or speaking to someone else to sort of jar yourself into understanding that there are people who still think that way, and we still have so much to do. So I never take it lightly when somebody leans on me for that kind of support. I know how difficult it is, and also I encourage people, and one of the things that I talk about in my memoir is late to step into yourself. People who, feel like they're 30, 40, 50, who then decide that now is the time. There's not a wrong time. It's on your own timeline. Right. Never too late. Never too late to have the life you want to have. And, it's, and, we're all here for it. We're all here to support each other. So,
yeah. I'd like to say also, anyone watching this that's in that situation, if you ever want to DM Gun Oil and have a chat to the team, and I'm sure Josh would say the same, if you want to reach out to him on Instagram and have that chat, if you want someone to talk to, we'd be very, very happy to do that. Josh, I want to talk about, what it was that you were looking to do as a career as a young person. What you do now, is that something that you thought you'd be doing?
Well, no. I mean, the only talent, I can't sing, I can't dance, I have no other, I always liked the arts and entertainment, but I'm not exactly talented in most of those areas. The one thing that I was always able to do growing up was, a mastery of the language. And so that was something that always interested me, because I guess, do what you're good at, right?
Yeah.
So I sort of thought that I was going to have a more traditional path, that I would, and when I say traditional, to some people, what I consider as traditional isn't even normal to them, even though I hate using the word normal, but working at the movie studios for so long, and I assumed I'd be in marketing and PR my whole life. Yeah. And then I don't know, I just had this moment where I burned out a little bit, and I could not, the thought of seeing the next year's slate of movies that I was going to be working on, I was like, I cannot do one more movie. And also, when you are working in PR and marketing, the job is basically to make famous people more famous and rich people richer. And I sort of felt like, why am I not putting my own, voice out there? So, I came up with the idea, and I was so burned out on that. And I feel like there had been so much that had happened during that time that I was really eager to tell the story, and figuring out how to tell the story, and the best framework to tell that story, and the best medium to tell that story. And the memoir just seemed like the most natural way to do it. And I just assumed it would be a small thing, and that, I think when we look at our experiences, we think that everything's so unique to us, and that other people won't. It's like it's our story, but what you find is there are so many people, even if not every word, there's so much that's so common among us that we can find and relate to. For example, Born Again, there is a lot of material about my coming out, but anybody who's been marginalized, made fun of, or felt different at any point in his or her life, his, her, or their, can find themselves in those pages, because it's not specific to sexuality, it's specific to how we see people and their differences. So I felt like this would be the best way to connect with people. And I figured, a handful of people would say, oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize quite how many people can find themselves in those pages.
Josh, when the book was released, you obviously are shining a torchlight on a lot of stuff that is actually not spoken about in the public. Obviously, a lot of people know about it in the industry, but it's actually not publicized. How did you navigate through such, I suppose, an opening of that situation?
I think we're in a time now where people see through bullshit. Yeah. They see through things that they find to be inauthentic if something doesn't ring true. And I felt the only way to tell a story is by being 100% honest, and I don't say anything that's not true in the book. And I also think that it's important that people know how things work, and how sometimes things can affect people in ways other than what they realize.
Yeah.
And it was hard because when you're doing something that's that honest, you have to own your own part of the problem. So it was a good examination of how I sort of move about my life now. I think I'm far more compassionate than I was before I wrote the book. I don't think I'm as hard on myself as I was before I wrote the book. So yeah, I mean, I think it's I'd much rather know in my heart that I wrote something that's extremely truthful than worry about whether somebody's
Josh, did you let your family know what was in the book before it was published?
My parents got a copy of the manuscript, and with the caveat that they were not to suggest changes or things that they saw differently. Courtesy, so they knew what was in the book before it came out,
Yes.
but not looking for any sort of feedback, because people always want to know when you're doing a project like that, people really want to know what's in there, and that they have a memory of certain events that's not necessarily yours. And you don't want to be influenced by, it's my memory of those things that happened. So you don't want to be influenced by that.
Josh, today has been very enlightening. I've not read the book, but very much going to after this conversation. So I really appreciate the time that you spent with us today. And again, just, being open and honest about everything as well. So, we've asked of you to sort of share some stuff that's very personal today. So that I'm very thankful for. And I'm sure that someone watching this will also glean some, really good content from what you've said about coming out. So really a heartfelt thank you from Gunnar and myself.
My pleasure. Thank you.